Hello, everyone. My name is Diosanta Reyes. Thank you for joining me today. In this presentation, I will be walking you through the journey of Angela, a woman whose journey represents both the pain and the possibility of healing from domestic violence. As clinicians, we encounter clients who present with anxiety or depression, but beneath those symptoms, there might be a story of coercion, control, and broken trust. Through Angela's case, I hope to explore not only evidence-based assessment for trauma and IPV, but also how faith and meaning can become part of the healing process. This is based on a Spanish movie in Netflix that you could actually see translated into English. The context of it is based in Spain. So let's start with a brief summary of Angela's story. Angela appears to have a perfect life. She's an architect, married to a charming and successful named Gonzalo, who has his own private business, very successful, high profile family. They have two beautiful daughters and a beautiful home that she designed herself. But behind the closed doors, that picture perfect image is fear, isolation, and control. Gonzalo is emotionally and physically abusive towards Angela, and he dictates what she does, who she talks to, and even how she dresses. Like many victims, Angela hides the bruises, literally and emotionally, and tries to survive in silence. What struck me the most was how normalized her fear became and how she rationalized the abuse because everyone saw him as this perfect husband. How there is this friend of hers that's noticing certain things but is unsure of what's going on. And someone actually puts a PFA or kind of like tries to make a demand that there is something going on in their relationship where her husband is being abusive. And Angela confronts one of her friends, thinking it was this friend who put that denounced the situation, putting her into more abuse. So it also like struck me how much when and when to intervene and how to intervene with someone who is experiencing domestic violence, because the highest point of risk is when they try to leave the relationship. So let's take a look at how Angela might have presented if she had come to therapy early on. When Angela first seeks help, she doesn't say that she's being abused. She describes her feelings, her presenting problem as feeling anxious, sad, and exhausted. She blames herself for not being a better wife, for being too sensitive. She reports insomnia, tension in her stomach, and a constant feeling of walking on eggshells. As therapists, these are red flags. But if we're not intentionally assessing for IPV, we might focus only on the anxiety or depression and miss the deeper story. Her emotional world is constricted, her self esteem is fragile, and her autonomy is slowly disappearing. So let's talk about how could we assess for IPV early on in this early stage. This client exhibits emotional distress yet does not disclose any abuse, making the assessment a little complex. Subtle signs of manipulation, the coercive control, especially when it's more emotional and psychological abuse and economic abuse, which this man had over Angela as well. That we see it towards the end of the story, how he controls her money in order not to let her leave the relationship. So, this complex assessment process involves emotional distress without clear disclosure of the abuse, making it challenging to assess the situation and identify the underlying control. It's super important to be able to identify these early signs in order to provide appropriate support, empower the client, and prevent escalation from controlling behaviors. In cases like Angela's, we could start with a brief, non-threatening screeners such as HITS, HITS, which ask often your partner if your partner hurts you, insults you, threatens, or screams at you. The danger assessment helps us evaluate the level of risk, especially when clients minimize the severity of the abuse, and the composite abuse scale can help us identify emotional control and harassment patterns. In this stage, Angela might receive a preliminary diagnosis of adjustment disorder with anxiety and depressed mood. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the trauma and coercive control are the core. Angela meets Edu. This is a man that she believes is helping her, I'm sorry. But turns out that this guy has been hired by her husband to kill her. He becomes another person who is just like charming and attends to her emotional needs and kind of like pretends to be on her side, but it's actually someone who's trying to kill her who was hired by her husband. And the plot like starts to intensifies as she discovers more and more of who her husband is. And I think in this stage of the movie, like Angela is just building up all of these emotions of feeling confused, doubting herself, not knowing what to believe. It's just grief process of denial. It becomes very interesting to see how she even ends up at a psychiatric unit because her husband looks all collected and makes her go crazy in a way or act crazy, air quotes, that she looks like the one that needs to be separated from her kids. Meanwhile, her husband is just utilizing that as also a manipulation tactic to shut her down, to quiet her, and also to destroy her emotionally. That realization breaks the illusion that she has been living under. Then comes the final violent episode during a school meeting that's being live streamed. Gonzalo, her husband, attacks her in front of everyone. That moment, though terrifying, becomes her liberation. Leaving an abusive partner is statistically the most dangerous time for a woman, and this scene captures that truth powerfully. After the assault, the truth is exposed, and Angela begins the journey towards safety and healing. Now that she's out of the relationship, let's consider what her symptoms and diagnosis might look like. So after leaving, Angela experiences nightmares, hypervigilance, intrusive memories, guilt, and confusion. She wonders, why did I stay so long? She's terrified of her husband's potential release from jail, and she's grieving the loss of her family, the family that she thought she had. At this stage, her assessment confirms clear PTSD, depression, anxiety, and complicated grief. Tools like PCL-5, BDI-2, and GAD-7, and also the ICG help us measure the symptoms and track recovery. Let's explore how her faith and spirituality begin to play a role in her healing. I want to also add that faith and spirituality could be used against her. I've seen that too in many cases, but in this case, I'm going to use it in a positive way. Angela's spirit was shattered. Her identity was tied to being a good wife and a good mother. She thought leaving would mean disobeying God, but through counseling and scripture, she begins to understand that marriage was never meant to be captivity, and that she finds comfort in verses like Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. In Isaiah 61:1, he binds up the brokenhearted. Her faith becomes the foundation for her restoration, not as a victim, but as someone deeply loved and chosen by God. Now let's look at how we could structure treatment in phases for clients like Angela. The first phase focuses on safety and stabilization, using danger assessment and developing a safety plan. The second phase involves trauma processing, perhaps introducing EMDR or TEF CBT, supported by measures like PCL5. And then the third phase will be addressing the grief and identity reconstruction through narrative therapy and reflection on loss. Finally, the empowerment phase integrates faith, self-worth, and new purpose. Each phase connects evidence-based methods, um, helping her with the client's spiritual framework, helping her to move from surviving to thriving. Let's touch on how these assessments are ethically and clinically essential. Each of these tools, HITS, Danger Assessment, CAS, and the PCL5, are backed by research and have demonstrated reliability. They give a structure and clarity when a client's story feels chaotic. As clinicians, it's our ethical duty to use validated tools to ensure accurate diagnosis, but not just use our diagnosis based on the tools, but also on our clinical assessment and what we're observing in session. When used compassionately, these instruments can become tools of truth and empowerment, and a great tool for discussions, for difficult discussions, and validation for these survivors. So let's move on towards discussing how faith integration enhances this healing journey. Faith integration using Bible approach involves applying biblical principles to all aspects of life, encouraging reflection on scripture to guide ethical decisions and personal growth. Something I notice is that on females who are leaving a domestic violence relationship, although this is not part of the movie, the spiritual aspect is something I wanted to add because I see a lot of clients who are coming from a Christian background, and sometimes the beliefs, the cognitive distortions about their role as Christian wife might play into keeping them stuck in the relationship. So this approach will foster a holistic worldview where faith connects with learning, work, and relationships, cultivating deeper spiritual understanding. Many of us were not trained thoroughly to recognizing IPV. So I'm wondering, how often do we ask our clients if they feel safe at home? Do we have a protocol if they say no? These are questions that we must constantly ask ourselves because our role goes beyond treatment. It includes advocacy, safety, and education. We must stay informed about risk, lethality, and local resources. Every session is an opportunity to bring light into what's hidden. So knowing what are our local resources are important, and also like reaching out to them and see what they offer. I know for my local my local resource, at this point they don't have any funds for like for relocation. That's the situation that I got. So if I refer a client who needs relocation and I say like this is a good number for you to contact, and this client find this barrier, this could bring more hopelessness. So to me, it's important also to reach out to those resources and just see what's available, so you're giving the proper recommendation to your clients. It's essential to know what's available in the community. Also, at a national level, there's a national violence hotline, domestic violence hotline, that is a vital resource. I'm focusing my resources in PA because I live in PA. My license is from PA, but I also live in North Carolina. So, also faith-based organizations like Catholic Charities can provide trauma-informed care. So, knowing where to refer your clients to ensure to help ensure safety, it's and continuing care is really important. So here are a few questions for us to just think about, like what are the barriers to keep clients from identifying as victims? How can we balance faith values with safety and autonomy? And what kind of systemic biases causes society to overlook respectable abusers? And finally, how can we improve early detection? These are questions that are meant to challenge us and remind us of our ethical calling. I know for me, this was a big takeaway from watching Angela. So it makes me think, on how Angela's story reminds us that healing is not just psychological, but it's also spiritual. And the freedom from violence honors God's design for love, dignity, and safety. As clinicians, as believers, we are invited to hold sacred space for transformation. Our role is to help clients reclaim their voice, rediscover their faith when appropriate, and gain hope. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I hope this helps.